Welcome to the Podcast Interview Marketing Show, where we go beyond just podcast guesting to driving real results with real marketing. I'm your host, Tom Schwab, and today we're exploring a growth strategy, that most people just ignore. But the smart business owners, they rely on it, and it works amazingly. Our guest today is Ryan Hogan. Ryan's a naval officer, a serial entrepreneur, and co-founder of Talent Harbor. Ryan has built his reputation, creating wildly successful brands like Hunt a Killer. And now he's changing how companies think about talent acquisition. And more importantly, how they grow their business without being addicted to ads. Today's big idea: don't chase prospects, build ecosystems. Ryan reveals how investing in centers of influence, not just your ideal clients, can unlock exponential growth, deeper trust, and way better leads. You'll learn how he's invested tens of thousands of dollars into podcasts. Now, they didn't pay off for about 10 months. And now, that's his biggest source of referrals. This isn't about quick wins or spray and pray marketing. This is about long-term, relationship-driven business building. And it works. If you've ever wondered how to get more referrals, build more trust, and scale without just shouting louder, then this episode is your blueprint. You'll often hear me say, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others. And today's guest, Ryan Hogan, the first time I talked with him, he explained what their strategy was, and it was genius, right? Instead of going for all the little followers, go for the centers of influence. Go for the people that know your ideal customers. And I guess that's what you get when you're the best at acquiring talent there at Talent Harbor. But Ryan, welcome.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Tom. Appreciate it.
So can you unpack this a little bit for me, right? The first time you said this on a call, I was like, explain that again to me. So I'm sure I didn't do it justice there.
Yeah, I think, for us, this really came from lessons learned. I guess if you look at anything that I do, it's from lessons learned. And so most things for me, 99% of things are not like ideas out of the universe. Like, it has been a lesson learned somewhere, and it's been this constant iteration and constant improvement. And so the biggest issue that we had at my last company, Hunt a Killer, was customer acquisition. And I don't mean from a standpoint of like acquiring enough customers. I just mean like we paid for our customers. So in the direct to consumer land, you are paying for traffic to come to your website, that traffic purchases, and it's this never ending cycle. And so when we started Talent Harbor, my vision for this was, let's build relationships. Let's build this on a foundation in which we don't have to rely upon paid advertising channels. And I think a lot of people are going here nowadays where it's like social media and like posting and establishing thought leadership and all these other things that come along with it. All of those things are good, and we do all of those things. I would say over the last 12 months, our primary growth strategy has been through COIs, as you said. So COIs are centers of influence. When we think about where we invest money into marketing, sales, advertising, things like that, believe it or not, we ignore our ICP. We ignore the ideal client profile. We ignore our prospects until they appear, meaning we're not going out and focusing or targeting, whether it's paid or organic, on who may become a client of ours. What we are doing is trying to build an ecosystem of people that service similar clients that we do. Once a client comes on board, they are the center of our universe. But where we really think strategically is we invest our money, our marketing dollars into relationships where other people are already servicing the client that may have needs for talent acquisition. So that's a little longer, but that's been kind of the whole ideal over the last year and a half, is really focusing on the COIs.
So, and you used words in there that a lot of times people will use interchangeably, right? Invest and spend. And you broke that down, right? You were spending on acquiring prospects, leads, whatever, because you spend the dollar, they come and they convert, or they don't, and it's gone. But you said investing in the centers of influence because that relationship, will pay off over the long term.
It's so interesting you picked that up, because that might have been a Freudian slip, because I could actually probably defend both. Like, I probably said that because when you spend money in advertising, yes, surely there are people call it investing. On the consumer product side, one of the reasons that I say spent is because on a good day, like on your very best day, 5% of your traffic will come to your website and convert. On average, it's anywhere between like 3 to 4, maybe like 2.5 to 4%. And I would say most companies out there that are operating in that space are at like converting anywhere between 1.5 to 2%. When you think about that, the reason that I probably said spent there is, let's say you're spending $1, and we're just going to use round numbers. This isn't exactly it, but let's just say you're spending $1 to get somebody to your website. That means for every $100 that you spend to get a new person to your website, only $2 of that I would classify as investing, because only $2, 2 people that came to your website actually did, which means you just blew $98. Look, I'm not all that great at math, but like $98 on people that had no interest, were never going to buy, but were just kind of curious because maybe you had a great advertisement. Maybe you sparked some sort of curiosity. So they came to explore, but they were never your ideal. For us, like when we invest in relationships. When we invest into mutually beneficial strategies. So for instance, we have a podcast. Our podcast is called Confessions of an Implementer. And I've spent the last year interviewing EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system implementers. So these are people that are trained, they are certified to come into your business and implement EOS. And that's been a big thing. So when they come on the show, we get to build a relationship. We get to figure out like, who are you? Who are me? Do we get along? Can we build some rapport in this? And then also the mutually beneficial part of it is we provide a platform for them to share their stories with the world. So when we invest, like we're constantly investing in ways that are mutually beneficial and things that will help us build and establish those relationships. And
so the EOS implementer, that's not your ICP. That's your center of influence.
That's one of our, right. And it's interesting because like we even back up out of centers of influence and we look at ecosystems as well. So EOS implementers service the same businesses that we service. And, one thing that we've done at Talent Harbor is we've made expert recruiting accessible to small and medium-sized businesses. And that's a fancy way of saying that expert recruiting is truly a competency. It's very hard to take this operations manager who is just world-class at operations, has been doing it their whole lives, or a world-class marketer that has been like incredible at marketing and say, hey, you are now an expert recruiter. Recruiting is a competency. It is something that you build through doing it over and over and over again. And there's certain tactics, strategies, processes. And so what most companies do is they just say, hey, we need another person. You're going to be the hiring manager because you lead this department. You make the final decision. Now this person has to go out, evaluate prospects, talent, things like that. And that's how most small, medium-sized businesses do it. And they only do it like that because in order for them to go to an outsourced expert recruiting shop, it's going to cost them anywhere between 20 and 30% of that salary. So think about that. We spent at Hunt to Killer, we spent up to $1 million on recruiting. We had one single hire that was $90,000 for an executive search firm to go find that person. And so what we've done is we've made expert recruiting accessible to small, medium-sized businesses. And it just so happens that the EOS ecosystem also services those same size businesses. And so that is one ecosystem where we have been very determined, very intentional about cultivating relationships and just doing good work around. But there's more than just that ecosystem now. And that's been kind of a core fundamental strategy for the last year.
That's interesting because there's a great book, Super Consumers by Eddie Yoon. And he talks about zip codes, right, of your super consumers. And physically it's zip codes. And then he would talk about, adjoining categories and stuff. But I love how you think of it as ecosystems. Who is in that person's ecosystem, in their orbit? Who influences them?
And how can you establish credibility inside of that ecosystem? And some of these things, we've been intentional about the strategy, but I don't think we didn't understand all of the results of the strategy. So for instance, our initial strategy was to go in and have some great conversations, have some content to distribute to stay top of mind, and build some relationships. And I think one thing that we didn't even contemplate at the time is the amount of trust and credibility that we would establish inside of that ecosystem, because ecosystems are connected, right? So they all hang out at the same place. They all kind of think and believe the same thing, and they all listen to the same thing. And so what we found is that we get anywhere between 2,000 and 3,000 downloads a month, and 70% plus of those listeners are other EOS implementers that just want to hear the background of one of their peers or colleagues. And so when we first started this thing, I would reach out to somebody and I would be like, "Hey, I got a podcast. Do you want to come on?" And if they did respond, 90% of the time they wouldn't. But if they did, they would be like, "No," or "Who are you?" or "Do you even have, what are you talking about?" Now I can go to anybody inside that ecosystem and be like, "Hey, I got this show. Oh, I already know who you are. I would love to come on. Thanks so much." And it's just, it's been great.
So I'm going to put the devil's advocate hat on here, right? This sounds great, but as the marketer, I'm thinking, well, this is going to take a long time to build up those centers of influences, right? If I spend $1 on an ad, like you said, $98 out of the 100 is wasted. 2% is good, but at least I know what my results are next week, right? How do you think about that when you're investing for the long term on this?
I will tell you, it was one of the hardest things that we did. And I say that because, I didn't know much about podcasting. So we had to go get an agency that would help us kind of put all of this together. And it's not cheap. I think their monthly rate was something like $4,000. We signed up for 12 months because we were committed to what we were doing. So they gave us a 10% discount, but that's $3,600 a month. And so we have 0 clients. We have really no business. We just have a concept. We have this recruiting as a service concept that we think is going to work, but nothing works on first blush. You have to iterate, you have to get feedback, and you just kind of keep evolving it. And we went 10 months. So 10 months without a single referral, 10 months of $3,600. We were $40,000 into a strategy before we ever got our first referral. And so, it's paid off, and it's paid off in a big way. Last month alone, we had 29 introductions. Last month was the biggest month we ever had from an introduction standpoint. It was huge. We are grateful, thankful, blessed, all of these different things. But we invested $40,000 into a strategy, a long-term strategy where we didn't understand, if there was going to be a payoff.
And it's in my mind, it's like, you planted the seeds with the faith that it was going to work. It made sense. It should work and everything like that. But you've got to get buy-in from everybody to stick to it, because heck, if you would have said, I don't know, maybe at the 6-month point, we're not seeing anything stopped. It's almost like, pulling up the plants before they give you fruit and everything.
And this is consistent amongst any organic strategy. You have to commit to it, believe, you have to get the signals. Obviously we work together, so we have a deep belief. And, this is a long-term strategy of getting on other people's shows, creating SEO, kind of all those things and pieces that come together. But you just it works. It takes time, but it works. And I think the hardest thing for me, because I'm all over the place. I've got 1,000 ideas. I move very fast. And so when things aren't working fast, I'm like, oh, what should we do? Or should we change? And so it's one of those things that's been probably extraordinarily challenging for me is we invested a lot into the show and it took some time, but it paid off. And that's kind of the tagline here is organic does pay off. Building relationships does pay off. There is no easy path. even if we were to talk about like paid search. So let's say what we used to do at Hunt to Killer was paid advertising through Facebook. Let's say we wanted to do paid LinkedIn advertising or paid search. Like I could make a strong argument that like you might be able to test and validate a lot of different things before you ever get to investing. Will we never invest? No, like we're going to get to a place of where we're doing paid. But what I wanted to do is understand truly, where do we find product market fit? What are the value propositions that our clients are seeing? How do we angle the messaging for this? And you can't do that unless you have clients that are saying like, I love this because it saves me time. I love this because it saves me money. I love that. Whatever the cases are, you won't understand where your clients are truly finding that deeper value until you start actually working. So,
and I think of, everybody's talking about referrals, right? I need more referrals. Referrals are the best clients. They close the quickest, right? But how do you get them, right? Whereas centers of influence provide that. And are you seeing that the traffic or the leads from that marketing channel are better or substantially different than you would get from just say investing versus spending?
100%. So especially from COIs who are deeply integrated into the business, because here's what happened when a referral happens. Generally speaking, when a referral occurs, it's because a need has already been identified. So like you don't have to prospect a whole bunch of people. So for us, there's not a constant need across every organization for recruiting. There just isn't. Like everybody doesn't need recruiting all the time. So when you're doing paid advertising, like the amount of people that you're hitting that don't have that need right now is pretty high. So the two biggest things that happen with a referral is one, there's already a pain point. There's already a need for whatever that service is. And then number two, the trust that is transferred. So when you think about consultants that are deeply integrated into businesses, they have built a certain amount of trust and credibility inside of that enterprise. So when they make that referral, that trust is now transferred to us. And so our ability to close on clients like that, where there's already a need and they already have trust because of where the referral came from, our close rate is much higher. And I can say this definitively now because about 4 weeks ago, we did layer in outbound. So we had two different paths that we were trying to decide. One was a cold calling path and the other was a cold email path. We chose the cold email path because while I do believe that cold calling will eventually work, I look at cold email as a way to send thousands of different emails, A/B testing, different variations, things like that, to like really craft and hone that message. And then we can translate whatever that message is and we can start actually layering in cold calls. But I felt like it would be faster. We've been doing it 4 weeks now. We have had several calls. The close rate is much lower. Now we have closed clients via the cold outbound, but it is much lower than a referral lead.
Yeah, I heard somebody refer to it as sales cylinder versus the sales funnel, right? Do I want to have 100 leads to get one client, or do I want to have, talk to 3 and get 2?
And that's how I've thought about this. Like we can go out and we can talk to 100 prospects. Out of those 100 prospects, maybe 30 of them actually have a need. Out of those 30, maybe only 10 of them can actually afford some sort of outbound. Out of those 10, now we have to actually win those 10. So went from 100 to 10, and now we're actually competing for those 10. Let's say we have a 20% close rate. So like we eventually closed 2 out of that 100 that we started with. The way that we think about COIs is that for every relationship we build, we have increased our touch point anywhere between 15 and 25 organizations that individual is actively consulting with. And so like when I think about this, I'm like, well, our time is valuable. As the leaders of our organizations, our time is incredibly valuable. So is it more valuable for me to go build 100 relationships that translates into 1,500 to 2,000 prospects? Or does it make sense to go talk to 100 prospective clients and maybe not close 2 of them?
Yeah, the leverage in that. The other word that I picked up is you said building the relationships with the COIs, right? And it's probably normal to you, but I was thinking, I think a lot of other people would say create. right? And you look and before you had said something about, building those and nurturing those. So it's not just about getting the initial contact, but what do you think about in building those, keeping those going, staying top of mind?
Yeah. So create is, and you can almost, and we do, you can almost think about a COI funnel the same way that you think about a prospect funnel, which is like when you think about a funnel for prospects, you use terminology like nurture. You have to nurture the leads down until eventually maybe you can close the client. We look at it as the same way on the COI side, where if we were to use the word create, I would say that's the first conversation. Like we have now created some sort of relationship, some sort of dynamic. It may be great. It may be terrible, but like we have created a relationship at this point. If that's the extent in which you would go, it's going to go nowhere because they'll remember you for that 30-minute phone call. And then 6 months later, when they have a client, whoever they're closest with at that point, which isn't you because you never followed up, that's where they go. And so nurturing is incredibly important. The other thing I'll tell you here is it has to be authentic, meaning like when I say we have a COI strategy, what I'm actually doing is building friendships with other humans. This may sound weird, but like I'm actually not, and we were talking about this before. I'm not in this for the money I'm in this to have fun. So I want to do cool things with cool people and have great conversations and challenge each other and all of that stuff. So when you go into this and you're like, hey, I'm going to start a company and I'm going to build it solely on some sort of COI ecosystem, you can't go in and say, this is a tactic and like, these are my marks. Like none of the relationships that I've built are my marks. But I've kept great relationships with people that I now call my friend. And it just so happens sometimes I send them referrals and sometimes they send them to me. But what do I get? Another great human to have a relationship with.
At times I hear people push back and say, well, that's not scalable, right? I can just send 1 million emails. Well, that's efficient, but not effective, right? And to have that relationship, just talking to somebody that relationships are the ultimate currency, right? Inflation doesn't take them. Death doesn't take them, whatever it is. If you got somebody that will vouch for you at this company or in the next company, that is gold.
Yeah, 100%. And so there are a lot of people that say it doesn't scale. And there probably is some credence to that. And like, it's all about where you want to start, how fast you want to grow, where you want to go. Like there's so many dynamics and things that happen in, because one of the things that I just mentioned is we just layered in outbound advertising outbound,
email.
Yeah. Outbound email. And so like COI is really about inbound. Like we create the relationship, we nurture the relationships, we build authentic friendships with people. And then sometimes that translates into business. The problem is you can't predict when it's going to translate into business. And so one of the strong arguments of like, this doesn't scale is like, it's too unpredictable. Like, great. Last month we had 29 referrals. This month, July, I think we've only had 10. And it's like, it's up and down. And that's kind of it. And that's the name of the game. I think diversification is a very important piece to this. So once you get to where you want to be, a single human, generally speaking, can't manage more than a couple dozen like true authentic relationships, even from a business standpoint. Like, and what you want to do is you want to continue to like hone that core group of people. But eventually you have to diversify if you want to grow. So like our aspirations, we want 10,000 perfect placements over the next 10 years. That translates into a $500 million company. That's where we're going. So we know we're going to have to diversify, which is why we're starting to layer in outbound tactics.
With that, do you look at higher levels of centers of influence, right? Also, and trying to go deeper on those, right? Because I can think of so many people will use podcast interviews as a networking strategy, right? But they create the relationship and that's all they ever do with it, right? They never go deep. So how do you think about that? You're going to you're going to limit yourself with that one channel, but that one channel will get you to where you need to leverage the other ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of things here. So one, we always think about activation points. So one of the things that we do now is we throw events. So about 3 or 4 months ago, we were at something called the Magic Castle in Los Angeles. And the event is we brought together the Vistage ecosystem, we brought together the EOSI ecosystem, and we brought together sales acceleration ecosystem. And my hypothesis here is that you have Vistage chairs, you have EOS implementers, and you have sales X people, and they all share the same ICP, but for some reason, there's no conduit bringing that together. And so that's what we are now. We are now the conduit. And so we don't come and push our agenda or anything like that. We just create these amazing environments that bring these people together. And we just happen to say like, oh, hey, I'm Ryan, good to see you again, blah, blah, blah. And this is something that we're repeating. So we've got our next event in Maryland in October. And then we're going to start going from city to city, making sure that we can kind of bridge the gap on these ecosystems. I've got something else, but if you wanted to go down that path, I'm happy to stay there.
I'm ready to go wherever you want to go. This is amazing.
Yeah. So we look at activation points. That's a big thing. One of your other questions is like, well, based upon where you're going, do you need to start kind of leveling up the relationships or figuring out kind of a different strategy there? For us, what's interesting is where we think the biggest growth is in the business model itself. We knew that this was going to be a problem because we do great work for clients. The clients that we work with are generally somewhere between 5 million and 20 million, which means there's not an ongoing need. There's not a constant need for 12 months out of the year for recruiting. And so we don't have contracts. We don't have success fees. We don't have any of that bull crap. We say, we come in, we understand your culture, we get to know you, we become an extension of your team, and we will find the people that you're looking for. That generally only lasts about 3 months. Some people stay for 2 months, some people stay for 4 months, but the reality is where we're playing in the market right now, there's not an ongoing need. And so we've got an acquisition machine right now, not a retention machine. And what we want is a retention machine. We want true recurring revenue. We want true predictability in the business. And right now, the predictability is just based upon what does our acquisition pipeline look like? And we want to get to a different place. So we're layering in nearshore staffing. And so essentially, like we can go to the clients that we have and we can say, hey, you're looking for an accountant, a controller, a sales and marketing manager, whatever the case is. And we can help staff that professional position. And that generally is more sticky. So to your point, like, how are we going to get to those numbers? Are we going to change some of our strategies? What we're hyper focused on right now is changing the business, layering in service where there's true predictability. And then once we feel comfortable that like we have a true retention based business versus an acquisition business, then we'll start looking at all those strategies and yeah, go from there.
And it's that idea of how you can, your clients, your centers of influence will tell you what they want there too.
Yes. That's a great point too. In the early days of any company, it doesn't matter. I had a zombie company. I've had a murder mystery company. Now I have a recruiting company. Whatever company it was, like we didn't know what we were doing and we didn't know truly what the market wanted. You don't know what the market wants until you put this fresh idea into the world and the market gives you signals. And like your job as an entrepreneur is to be one, disassociate your identity from the business, because the closer you're attached, the more you think that this thing is your baby, the less likelihood of you being able to pivot and listen to those signals and actually take action off of those signals. We've pivoted Talent Harbor. We don't have to get into all this today, but like we've pivoted Talent Harbor like 5 times over the last 18 months. And like, it's because we listen, we change, we iterate, and we go. And that's just been kind of the biggest thing.
Yeah. One of the core values we have is our only true competitive advantage is being able to learn and execute. Right. And that's not just stay in the path. And I think today in this AI world, that's even more so. But what won't change is the relationships and the power of that. Ryan, thank you so much for sharing what's ordinary to you and is amazing to me. And I got to say, thank you, sir, because we both were in the Navy. Well, you still are, right? And you outrank me there. So I got to send every email with very respectfully on those. But if people want to get in touch with you, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, best place to get in touch with me would be talentharbor.com/Ryan. And shout out to Tom. Thanks for that. But you can go there. So if you want to reach out to me directly, my email's there, my LinkedIn's there, any way you want to find me, it all lives on that page. You can head there and, I don't know, would love to talk. No business, business aside, if you just need a soundboard or something like that. Yeah, I've had quite the journey and so many lessons learned, so many failures. And so I just love helping people out.
Well, thank you, Ryan.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Tom. Appreciate it.
What a masterclass from Ryan Hogan. Today, we didn't just talk about marketing. We talked about investing in relationships that scale. Ryan showed us that referrals, it's not just luck. They're engineered by building credibility inside of a connected ecosystem. So here's your action step. Identify your COIs, those centers of influence. Who already serves the same audience that you do? Then think about how you could build authentic relationships with them. Not how to pitch them, but how to partner with them. Start with a conversation. That's what Ryan did. Sure, it took time to pay off, but when it did, it paid off big. Because someone who already has that trust, when they refer you, you can forget the sales funnel. It becomes a sales cylinder. You talk to 3 people and 2 become clients instantly. Relationships take time, yes, but they're the most scalable asset in your business. You can't fake them. You can't buy them. You can't shortcut them. But when you build them right, they compound. So don't just spend more, invest more. And if you want to see how Ryan's team is making expert recruiting accessible to small and mid-sized businesses, make sure you check him out over at talentharbor.com/Ryan. And be sure to connect. Until next time, keep planting those seeds. And remember, relationships are the ultimate currency.